In this video, I want to show you one mix technique that can literally make or break the sound of your mix. If you do this well, you can take your mix to new levels and make it sound incredible, ready to go straight on any radio station and also on those huge Spotify playlists next to huge major label artists that you idolize. It will fit right in. However, if you screw this up, you can quite literally turn your mix to trash and it can fall apart within seconds. Now, what I'm talking about in this video is mix bus processing. Your mix bus is that one stereo fader that all tracks in your mix session go through. So the idea is that before you start mixing, you put some processing on your mix bus, that one stereo fader, so that it's affecting absolutely everything. Then you can go through and you can tweak all of the tracks. You can add EQ, compression, FX, whatever you need to taste. But the mix bus has always got that processing that all of your tracks are going through. This is called top-down mixing, and it's a very, very common technique amongst professional mixers. But as with everything, there are no hard and fast rules. There are mix engineers out there churning out incredible sounding mixers with zero processing on their mix bus. It's about figuring out what works for you. Top-down mixing really works for me, and it's ingrained into my process. I'm going to show you exactly what is on my mix bus, what order it goes in, the thought process behind that, and I'm also going to show you what happens when you screw this up and how quickly you can turn a great sounding mix to a really terrible sounding mix. So let's dive in. Now, the first plugin is some saturation. This is a console emulation by Slate Digital, and it's emulating the mix bus of a huge console. I've got it set to Brit 4K-E, which is an SSL E-Series console. I really like the sound of that console for mixing. It's got a really nice thick presence in the mid-range when you drive it. You've also got other ones here. You've got a Neve. It's a little bit thick for my taste. I like tracking through the Neve, but not so much mixing. You've got a Trident, you've got an API. You can play with it and you can see what you like best. So that's the first thing. It's essentially just a saturation plugin. The next thing is my Mixbus compressor. I'm using a Focusrite Red 3. I really like the sound of this compressor, and I use it probably on 90% of mixers. It's a VCA style compressor, so it's like the SSL Mixbus compressor, but I find it's not quite as grabby as the SSL. Where I want something like that, sometimes I will switch this out and use an SSL. I find that the SSL works really well for pop music. Most of the time I'm working on and mixing rock and country music, and personally I just prefer the sound of the Focusrite Red 3, so that's what I tend to reach to first. After the compressor, I've then got an EQ. Specifically, it's a Pultec from UAD. What I tend to find is when you add compression to your mix, that can sometimes suck up a little bit too much low end. So I'm adding some lows back in. I've got this set to 60 Hertz on the lows, and I'm boosting here. And I'm also adding a high shelf as well. Got a boost at 5K. Just to add that sheen, I really like the way that this sounds. And if I add that curve here, that high shelf on the mix bus, so it's affecting everything, I find it's just a quicker process when I'm going through EQing all the tracks. Rather than putting some highs on absolutely everything, I can just put it here on the mix bus with the Pultec, which sounds amazing. The next thing I've got is just another EQ. This is the Custom Series EQ from Slate. Most of the time, this is either flat or just in bypass. The reason I've got this is, as I'm getting towards the end of the mix, if I feel like I just need to add some mids, or I need to add a chunk of low mids or highs or whatever, I can just quickly pull this up and add whatever I need. But if I don't, then it just gets bypassed. The final thing is then a tape machine. This is the Virtual Tape from Slate. I love the sound of tape. It just adds a nice quality. It smooths out the top end. It adds some nice weight in the lows and the low mids. And it's just got a sound that I love. I've got it set to the 1/2-inch 2-track machine, this particular tape type at the top, and I've got it set to 15 IPS. For me, that just sounds more classic tape. I just really like the sound of that. However, 15 IPS does have quite a significant low boost. So what I've done is I've gone into the settings and I've just adjusted the bass alignment. I'm knocking it down to about 3 dB. So I'm taking that down just to account for the bump that the 15 IPS is adding. You can have noise. No one wants noise, so I've got that all the way down to the bottom. Now, I also do have a limiter. This is just the Pro L2 from FabFilter. I like to hear how my mix is reacting to a limiter so that I can get a better idea of what's going to happen during mastering. Also, when I'm sending the mix out to the client, I want it to be a fairly competitive volume. I don't want to be sending them a super quiet mix. So I will use that just to apply some gentle limiting, not a load, but just to get it up to a decent volume so that they can assess the mix and we can go through the notes. The final thing that you can see here, just in case you are wondering, this is an external effect, but it's just for me to be doing this video right now. It's just some routing for the audio for the video. So there's no processing going on from that. In the mix session, that would not be there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play you a section of this mix with all of this stuff engaged so that you can hear what it sounds like. I'm then going to take all of it off so that you can hear what it sounds like without any of that processing. And then we'll go through them one by one and we'll see what happens when we push things too far and how quickly the mix can fall apart.
Stars are fading, but the moon's still bright. So I'll be raising glasses till the morning light. But I don't wanna fight no more. When that sun's quit shining and that grass ain't green no more, I don't want nobody else. I'll be waiting for you when your head's deciding and your world don't turn no more. When your heart's quit smiling, I'll be waiting for you. I'll be waiting for you.
Okay, so hopefully you agree that that's a great sounding mix, really, really solid. What I'm going to do now is disable all of this stuff. So the console emulation, the mix bus compressor, that EQ, and the tape.
I'll just keep my distance. Stars are fading, but the moon's still bright. So I'll be raising glasses till the morning light. But I don't wanna fight no more. When that sun's quit shining and that grass ain't green no more, I don't want nobody else. I'll be waiting for you when your head's deciding and your world don't turn no more. When your heart's quit smiling, I'll be waiting for you.
Okay, so as you can hear, it's a pretty drastic difference. When we take all of that stuff off, the mix, it doesn't sound bad. It's not a terrible mix, but it sounds a lot less weighty. It's a little bit anemic in the lows and the low mids. It's just lacking that professional sheen, for lack of a better word. Really difficult to explain, but hopefully you can hear it for yourself. Great mix bus processing can take your song from a 5 or a 6 to a 10. Let's see what happens now when we start pushing things way too far. So I'm going to put all of this stuff back on. So I'm going to play the chorus. That's where everything is kind of hitting. We'll loop that round and let's start with the console saturation. Now, one thing that you have to bear in mind here, particularly when you're using analog model plugins like this, or if you are routing out to hardware, is you really have to pay attention to your gain staging. And to be honest, a lot of the rules that you might have learned about gain staging in the digital realm kind of go out the window. People will look at this plugin on my mix bus and freak out because the needle is in the red. Sometimes this is even lighting up to show that the plugin is clipping. However, clipping analog equipment is not the same as clipping digital converters. Digital clipping is nasty. It's a nasty sounding distortion. But analog clipping is nice. It's pleasant. It's smooth. It just sounds good. So don't be afraid of pushing level into your plugins that are modeling analog equipment. This is exactly what you would do if you're using the real equipment. If I was sat behind a huge SSL-E console right now, I would be pushing level into the mix bus and getting that nice thick saturation that you're going to hear in a second. Same with the compressor. You'd be boosting the output to get the sound of the transformers. Okay, so let's loop the chorus around and I'm going to show you what happens when we don't set this thing in its sweet spot.
Quit shining and that grass ain't green no more. I don't want nobody else. I'll be waiting for you.
Okay, so that's where we've got it set now. So what I'm going to do now while it's playing is adjust this input. As I turn this down, this puts less level into the plugin. As I turn it up, it puts more into it. What the SSL-E does is it adds a really nice saturation and thickness to the mid-range. We've got this set perfectly in the sweet spot right now. If we don't put enough in, then we don't get the benefit of that saturation. If we put too much in, then it all starts to distort, it gets a bit nasty and it falls apart. So listen to what happens as we adjust that.
When your head's deciding and your world don't turn no more, when your heart's quit smiling, I'll be waiting for you. When that sun's quit shining and that grass ain't green no more, I don't want nobody else. I'll be waiting for you. When your head's deciding and your world don't turn no.
So just to stop it there, can you hear all of that awful sort of distortion and just nastiness when we're pushing this too high? I mean, that is way to the extreme, and hopefully you would notice if that was happening. But there is a sweet spot. When it's down here, we're not getting the benefit of that saturation, and it just doesn't sound as good. But when we've got too much, it falls apart. Let's now move on to the compressor. As I play this, we're getting somewhere around 3 dB of gain reduction. Some people might, again, freak out, think that's a lot of gain reduction on the mix bus. However, the ratio is super low. We are only at a 1.5:1 ratio. And that's just what feels good to me. If I was using an SSL style compressor and we were using a 4:1 ratio, there's no way that I would be compressing by 3 dB. We'd just be touching the meter, if anything. So let's see what happens, first of all, when we bypass this compressor, but then I'm also going to show you what happens when we adjust the threshold, when we're not getting enough compression, so we don't get the benefit of the glue, but also if we push things too far, we get too much gain reduction, and it just sounds squashed and we lose the dynamics.
When that sun's quit shining and that grass ain't green no more, I don't want nobody else. I'll be waiting for you. When your head's deciding and your
So first of all, bypassing the compressor just loses some of the togetherness of the mix. As soon as we put it back on, everything just feels kind of locked together. It is a glue. Mix bus compression is the glue of your mix.
and that grass ain't green no more, I don't want nobody else. I'll be waiting for you.
So not enough. You can hear things just start to get a little bit more erratic, a little bit looser. We're not getting the glue. Now let's push it the other way.
When your head's deciding and your world don't turn no more, when your heart's quit smiling.
Now we've killed it. We've lost all life in the mix. The transients are disappearing. The snare just sounds nasty. We've killed the mix. So let's now put it back in that sweet spot.
I'll be waiting for you. I'll be when that sun's quit shining and that grass ain't green no more, I don't want no.
That's the perfect compromise. We've got all the glue from the compressor, but we're not completely killing the mix and crushing the life out of it. Now next is the EQ. The Pultec is the one that's doing most of the heavy lifting in terms of the EQ. Just listen to what happens when we take this plugin out.
I'll be waiting for you. When your head's deciding and your world don't turn no more, when your heart's quit.
The Pultec has just such a gorgeous tone to it, and even just running audio through a pair of Pultecs just sounds good, even when the EQ is flat. Let's put it back in, see how it sounds.
Nobody else. I'll be waiting for you. When your head's deciding and your world don't.
Now next is the tape machine. We've got everything set perfectly in the sweet spot right now. Take a listen to what happens when I bypass this.
Green no more. I don't want nobody else. I'll be waiting for you. When your head's deciding and your world don't turn no more.
Again, this is just a very small thing that adds a massive difference to the mix, in my opinion. When we disable the tape machine, the low end gets a little bit more uncontrolled and the top end just loses that smoothness. So let's listen to what happens when we push the tape machine too far. As you can see, I've got the input dialed back quite a bit. This is where I felt it sounded good. But when it's too far, you can hear everything just kind of get a little bit nasty. Take a listen.
Grass ain't green no more. I don't want nobody else. I'll be waiting for you. When your head's deciding, and your world don't turn.
Listen to the transients in the drums on that drum fill. They are getting absolutely obliterated by the tape.
I'll be waiting for you.
Way too much clipping, way too much distortion. It just doesn't sound good. There is an argument for driving things into tape. You can drive bass guitars into tape. You can drive electric guitars, acoustic guitars, and get that distortion if you want, but that's not something that we want on the entire mix. So let's now dial it back. Let's find the sweet spot for the tape machine.
Grass ain't green no more. I don't want nobody else. I'll be waiting for you. When your head's deciding, and your
As you can hear, that's the point, that we're getting all the benefits of the tape, but without any of the drawbacks. We've got that control in the lows, that smoothness in the highs, and that gorgeous sort of transient response from the snare and the kick and the drums, but without obliterating it. And you can also hear how all of these are working together, and you can imagine how quickly things could get out of control and sound really, really nasty if you've got multiple ones of these plugins that are not set in the sweet spot. Imagine getting too much of that distortion and saturation from the mix bus, as well as absolutely squeezing the life out of your mix with too much compression, and then adding too much of this tape effect and getting all of the distortion. Imagine how that's going to compound. It is going to turn your mix to trash. In fact, let's do it right now. Let's see what that sounds like.
no more. When your hearts quit smiling, I'll be waiting for you. I'll be when that sun's quit shining, and that grass ain't green no more. I don't want nobody else. I'll be waiting for you. When your head
We've taken a great sounding mix and in a matter of seconds absolutely destroyed and obliterated it. And it doesn't matter how good your mastering engineer is, they are not going to be able to fix that. Let's put it back to the sweet spot.
head's deciding, and your world don't turn no more. When your heart's quit smiling, I'll be waiting for you. I'll be when that sun's quit shining, and that grass ain't green no more. I don't want.
Now, if you're a songwriter, then I've got an amazing free tool that you absolutely need to check out. And chances are you're not doing this yet. If you're like most songwriters, you probably have a million song ideas floating around your head, or that you've hummed into your phone, scattered across various apps. The problem here is that that is a guaranteed recipe for forgetting or losing potentially amazing songs. The problem with your phone voice notes app is that as you add more ideas, your older ones get pushed further and further down and forgotten about, or worse, you end up changing your phone, getting a new handset, and losing everything forever. How many great songs have never seen the light of day because of this? Well, I've got a solution to this problem. It's called the Songwriters Project Organizer. This is an amazing free tool where you can store all of your song ideas in one place, never forget about them, and crucially, never ever lose them. It has a really intuitive app that you can access anywhere on any device, so wherever inspiration strikes, you can add that idea directly into your project organizer, and you can also track the progression of every single idea. It has different lists, and you can move the ideas from one list to another as they progress. Another great feature of this organizer, and probably my favorite, is that you can share it with anybody that you choose. This makes collaboration an absolute breeze. So perhaps you're working with a producer, a mix engineer, maybe you're collaborating with another artist. You can securely share your organizer with those people, and you can just watch your project blossom as everyone adds their own contributions to it. You can even attach notes, files, and web links so that everything is accessible instantly to anyone who needs it. So if you like what I'm talking about here, there's a link in the description below for you to get access to the free Songwriters Project Organizer. So start using this today. It is a way more intuitive way of working. Having everything on one app where you can access it instantly, everything is together, means that you will never forget or lose a great song idea again. And having everything really organized like this means that you can focus on writing better songs, finishing more projects, which is ultimately going to progress your career as an artist. So click the link in the description and get started right now.